The co-founder and CEO of Google DeepMind, Demis Hassabis, has stepped down. So Google AI, which is already a little bit behind, is going to be shaken up. I'm going to be looking into what has actually happened and what this means for the future of Google and the future of artificial intelligence. So let's hop in and look at the actual shakeup. First of all, let's look at Demis's tweet. This is the announcement. I've been working towards AGI, artificial general intelligence, my whole life. And as we enter this pivotal moment, I'm stepping into a new role as chair of Google DeepMind and chief scientist of Alphabet. This will allow me to focus on long-term strategy, accelerating scientific breakthroughs, including leaning into my work at Isomorphic to help cure diseases. And I'm excited that Koray will be stepping in to lead Google DeepMind as SVP alongside Josh Woodward and our executive team. I could not be more excited and confident about this amazing new chapter. So Demis is going to become the head chief scientist of Alphabet, whereas Jeff Dean, who previously held that position, is moving out to start up his new company. So let's quickly look at Jeff Dean, because I think this is probably what's precipitated everything, and people aren't paying enough attention to this part. This is Jeff Dean, prior chief scientist at Alphabet, the holding company of Google, saying, I'm very excited to announce that along with my longtime friends and collaborators, we are founding Discovery Loop AI, a public benefit corporation whose mission is to automate machine learning, science and engineering to accelerate discoveries and progress. The four of us have worked together for 14 to 30 years and have helped build some of the world's most used products, infrastructure and AI models. We're excited to turn our attention to this ambitious endeavor. So they're going off to do research and to do science. Demis is also saying, this is great, I'm going to get to focus on bigger things like science. And Koray is being left running DeepMind. That means the Gemini models, that means Gemma, that means the actual products that are being put out into the market. I think that is the split that we are seeing here. We're seeing a split between the productized version of artificial intelligence that Google needs to get working so they can make some money, and then the future-facing version of artificial intelligence, like AGI, which is Demis Hassabis' big goal, science, research, and what the future iterations of this technology are going to look like. That and Sundar Pichai, so head of Google, has said, just shared some changes we're making to the teams at Google DeepMind. Demis Hassabis is stepping up to become chair of Google DeepMind, so removing from the CEO position, but becoming the chair, and chief scientist of Alphabet. So it is being framed as a promotion rather than him losing control over DeepMind. Interesting framing. He'll stay closely connected to Koray and the Google DeepMind teams. Now, if you know anything about the history of Demis Hassabis and the history of Google DeepMind, and I'll give you some great resources for this because it's fascinating stuff, you'll know that this has always been what Demis is interested in. He's interested in big, chunky problems. So as soon as they had to face the commercial realities of building an AI model that was released to the people as a public product, that created frictions within Google DeepMind. Bizarrely enough, the most impact Demis has had on my life is a game called Theme Park. Oh God, look at the size of that screenshot. Gives you an idea of how long ago this game was. This is Theme Park. Demis actually programmed most of this game along with Peter Molyneux, including things like the artificial intelligence, the AI of the park visitors, of which there would be hundreds visiting your park at any one time. And I remember as a child jacking up the amount of salt inside of the burger stands here in order to then jack up the price of the drinks so that people would pay exorbitant amounts of money to slake their thirst. That was all possible because of the AI, because of the behavior that was built into this game by Demis Hassabis, which I did not know at the time, of course. He was also a chess master at a very, very young age, having to sit in booster seats to play his games. Set up DeepMind, sold to Google for what at the time was considered an absolutely obscene amount of money, which now seems like one of the best deals ever made because Google bought a huge amount of talent for a very low, comparatively to now, amount of money. And then in 2016, they had big successes with AlphaGo. So they've always been focusing on games. Games are a place where you can practice with your artificial intelligence in order to simulate outcomes in the real world. So this was the focus very early on in DeepMind, was to have these AIs learn to play games and then extrapolate out from that into the real world. So we're seeing something similar in modern AI with world models. So they started with Atari games, things like Breakout, for example, and then moved on to AlphaGo. There was another fantastic documentary, not the thinking game, but here we go. AlphaGo, the movie. This is a award-winning documentary from the Google DeepMind teams about creating a program that could play Go. And then on from there, pretty much any game that you could throw at it. And there's a particular move. It was move, let me get it right, 37. Move 37, I mean, go and watch the documentary. When move 37 happens in a exhibition match against Lee Sedol, there's this realization that these machines are almost, well, how can I word this? Not just as clever as us, but there's something more, a spark of genius, a spark of something else, which is beyond human intelligence. Alien intelligence, I'm not going to call it super or general intelligence because those are loaded terms, but there is something special about these machines, and it's well worth watching the documentary just to see how that unfolds. And then the melancholia that befalls everybody, even the team creating AlphaGo, when they realize that they have defeated humanity. They have defeated humanity in this previously human-only task. And then they moved on to projects like AlphaFold. Again, if you watch the thinking game, I highly recommend you do so tonight, especially in lieu, after the news of Demis Hassabis stepping down. The thinking game comes, oh wow, you can see it's the most replayed moment. This is one of my favorite moments in any documentary, maybe in any film, is around 1 minute 14. I'm not going to spoil it. You're going to go ahead and watch it. But something happens in the room at that point, at 1 minute 14 in the movie The Thinking Game, which will probably bring a tear to your eye and led to Demis and his team getting the Nobel Prize, and well deserved for that in 20. So why now? Why is it split now? This is the big question. So for my money, I believe it's because Jeff Dean was going off to do his own thing. So that precipitated a crisis. Again, this is speculation, we do not know, but Jeff Dean was putting together his team to go and start his own company. As a result of that, they were going to lose their chief scientist, while Jeff Dean set up Discovery Loop, which meant that role needed to be filled. Demis Hassabis is a very obvious choice for that, but then what happens to his CEO position? Can he still run Isomorphic? Can he be a chair at Google DeepMind and chief scientist and CEO of DeepMind? Well, obviously he can't be chair and CEO at the same time, but it would just be too much on his plate. So bumping him up to chief scientist means removing him from CEO and putting someone into place. So I think this is great because what this is going to allow is for a split. So a split between the commercials, creating models, creating harnesses, creating tools that go out into the workplace, go out into the general world, adding Gemini into things like search, adding it into AI overviews, getting that kind of market penetration and being able to deliver to the people, artificial intelligence. That would be one side, and that is going to be under DeepMind on the product and the commercial side. So I think the research and the commercials have been split here, which I believe will be healthier for Google in the long run. However, and I'm seeing a lot of this, especially on social media, people saying, well, Google's dead, that's it. Take them out back, shoot them behind the shed. This is it. This is the end for Google. One strong argument here is they're losing talent. They're hemorrhaging talent. And this has been happening for a while. We had Noam Shazir, Josh Jumper, hilariously named for somebody who jumped to another company. And now the chief scientist, Jeff Dean, and a bunch of his colleagues have gone to start Discovery Loop. We might be seeing a brain drain inside of Google AI. This is a huge risk. And unfortunately, OpenAI and Anthropic are paying absolutely obscene amounts of money to pull away researchers. And they are also at the cutting edge compared to what Google are putting out into the market. So I can see the appeal of leaving Google to go to work for Anthropic, go to work for OpenAI. So they may be losing their talent. And the fact that Demis Hassabis has now been removed or has removed himself from the CEO position of DeepMind could be a continuation of that trend. But he is the new chief scientist. So we'll see where that goes. It is not as bad as it sounds. A lot of headlines are like, oh my God, Google has lost Demis Hassabis. No, He's been shifted into another role, potentially one where he's going to have even more impact. So there is a bearish case. I don't fully ascribe to it. I see this more as a reshuffling than booting him to the curb. Absolutely not. And I think the bullish case that we need to keep in mind, and this is one that I've been going on about for a long time, we focus too much on the models. We focus too much on the, oh, well, Gemini 3.5 is a bit crap, Gemini 3 was a bit rubbish, Claude is much better, ChatGPT is better. Yeah, true. 100%. I do not disagree with that. What Google have is sustainability. They can stay in the game longer than OpenAI and Anthropic. OpenAI and Anthropic are currently private companies. They're not public companies, and they need to continuously go back to investors and say, hey, we need an extra couple of $100 million, because they cannot self-fund, unlike Google. Google, on the other hand, have the whole stack. So OpenAI and Anthropic need to go to NVIDIA and say, hey, we need to buy another 20,000 GPUs. Or they need to go to Oracle, they need to go to AWS, they need to go to Microsoft Azure and say, hey, we need to rent some more cloud servers. They need to constantly spend that money. So all of that money coming in is going straight back out to GPUs and cloud infrastructure. Guess what Google have? Google create their own chips. They're called TPUs, tensor processing units. They still use GPUs as well, and they buy them like everyone else, but they have their own infrastructure. And a lot of their more modern models, the more recent Geminis, were exclusively trained on TPUs. So they have sustainability, self-sustainability. So if NVIDIA decides to crank up the prices, or if there is kind of a chip shortage from NVIDIA, that will not affect Google because they have their own manufacturing, their own ability to create chips. They also have their own cloud infrastructure, Google Cloud. So they're not reliant on Oracle, AWS, on Microsoft, or anyone else. They own that infrastructure. Above that, they have the models. So they have Gemini, they have the Gemma models, which I believe are very good personally. And then they have the application layer. This is really, really important because it gives them distribution. They have Chrome. Chrome, I believe, is about 80% market penetration when it comes to internet usage. They also have Android. So they are in, I believe it's the majority, 60% of phones. I can check that. About 60% plus of phones are on the Android ecosystem. This gives them market penetration off the board. They just need to add AI features into Chrome, into Android, and then suddenly they own the market. And they don't need to rush into that. In fact, they shouldn't rush into that because it's such a big push. And they will basically be giving everyone on Earth access to artificial intelligence. They need to get it right the first time. They also have YouTube. They have Google search, kind of a big deal. You've probably heard of it. They've got Workspace, Gmail, etc. They have so many surfaces where they can deploy, whereas ChatGPT and Anthropic, Claude, they require us to download a new application. That's a friction there. We need to download a new app or log into a new website. Google are already there. All they need to do is add in the AI features, and they basically win by default. And then finally, money. They have lots of money, unlike OpenAI, unlike Anthropic, who have to keep raising money. They have to keep going back and saying, can we have some cash? Google are an incredibly cash-rich business, mainly because of search. That's another story. They need to replace search with artificial intelligence. That's a story for another day. But right now, they are cash rich and they are able to sustain in a way that the other AI companies are not. So they're still in a very, very good position. They should not be underestimated. However, these same strengths also create a problem. Yes, they have compute, research, distribution, etc. But it's a big company who are doing so many different things at the same time. I know a number of the Google teams, and I say this with all love in the world because I think they're doing amazing stuff, and I know them personally. A lot of you don't know what the others are doing. So at least once I've had to tell a Google employee about another Google project that they just had no idea about. Because it's such a large company, and because they experiment with so many things, they don't necessarily know, the full picture, that's a big problem. I actually asked, because I was like, there are so many vibe coding tools from Google. Let me pull together an actual list. So I thought, well, I'll ask Google itself. I'll ask Google AI overview. So I was like, yo, what vibe coding tools does Google has? And it's like, cool, we've got AI Studio, true, Firebase Studio, Google Antigravity, Gemini Code Assist, Gemini CLI, command line interface, and the agent development kit. And I was like, okay, that's already quite a lot, but I know they're missing some. I know there's a bunch of tools that are missing from this list. That was given to me by Google. And Google's AI doesn't know what AI products they have. Guys, make this make sense. And there's even more than this. It only told me about these ones because I said, hey, what about these? The point here is that even in one small sector, vibe coding, Google have maybe 15, 20 different products. That's confusing for the consumer. Again, I love what you're doing, Google, but it needs to be sorted out. Whereas ChatGPT or Claude, they'll say, boom, here's a new model, boom, this is where you can get it. Here's where you get it inside the app, you get it inside Codex, and everyone knows exactly where to get it and how to use it. That is never the case with Google. It is incredibly messy. So I think the split between Demis and presumably the scientific teams will probably be going with him, going and focusing on the big problems, AGI, curing all diseases. But, things like this, problems that can be sorted in a couple of years, having them off in their own lab, having them off and letting Demis set strategy at that level, I think is very beneficial. And then that means that the teams that are shipping products can hopefully get their act together and be less distracted. And they can focus on creating a more comprehensive suite of tools that the consumer actually knows what is available, how to access them, and hopefully with a higher cadence of releases so that they can stay competitive. Because right now, there's very little reason to use a Gemini model. So I think this is potentially extremely positive. I'm not a doom sayer like a lot of the people out there saying that this is it for Google, but we will see. I think this is their race to lose. They have the stack. Whether or not they can maintain the people who made that stack, the talent, that's what we will have to see. And without the people, remember, this all comes crumbling down. We'll be finding out over the next 6 months, 12 months, a year. But I'm hoping that this puts Google back in the race and that Gemini models can start to actually compete with OpenAI and Anthropic. That is my hope, because more competition is always a wonderful thing. Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe to the newsletter, aiwithkyle.com, and to the YouTube channel that you're currently watching, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.